Let us pray. Lord, have mercy upon us. Lord, have mercy upon us. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Almighty God, who in thy wisdom and goodness hast appointed the office of rulers and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of men and women, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor us thy servants, whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in these islands. Let thy blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands and those whose interests thou hast committed to our charge. And this we beg for Jesus Christ's sake. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
Thank you. Acting Clerk, morning members. The House is now in session. Okay. Members, the confirmation of the minutes of the 8th of December have been circulated. Are there any amendments required? None. The minutes will be confirmed as printed. Messages from the governor? There are none. Announcements by the speaker? The announcement this morning is that we've been informed that Honorable Member De Silva will not be present today. Messages from the Senate? There are none. Papers and other communications to the House. We have 4 papers this morning. The first is in the name of the Premier and Minister of Finance. Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach for the information of this honorable House the pre-budget report in advance of fiscal 2024-25 and also the Bermuda Fiscal Responsibility Panel Annual Assessment 2023.
Thank you. The next is in the name of the Minister of Transport. Minister?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. I have the honor to attach and submit for the information of the Honorable House of Assembly the 2022 Annual Report of the Bermuda Airport Authority in accordance with Section 23 of the Bermuda Airport Authority Act 2017.
Thank you. And the final one this morning is in the name of the Minister of Cabinet Office. Minister?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach and submit for the information of the Honorable House of Assembly the Trademarks Regulations 2023 made by the Minister responsible for intellectual property in exercise of the power conferred by Section 94 of the Trademarks Act 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. That moves us on from papers and communications. The next item on the order paper is petitions. There are none. And move on now to statements by ministers and junior ministers. And this morning we have the first statement this morning is from the Premier. Premier, would you like to present your first statement?
Certainly, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to you.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, it is an honor to rise today on behalf of the government in our last sitting of 2023 to provide an economic and fiscal update to this honorable House and to the people of Bermuda. This statement will cover the latest report from the Fiscal Responsibility Panel, the government's mid-year financial performance, and the government's pre-budget report tabled moments ago. Mr. Speaker, earlier today, I laid for the information of this honorable House the Bermuda Fiscal Responsibility Panel Annual Assessment Report 2023, which I'll refer to hereinafter as the report, which can be found on the Ministry of Finance section of the Bermuda Government Portal. The report represents the 9th annual report of the Fiscal Responsibility Panel, a reputable and independent committee to review, monitor, assess, and publicly report on the fiscal progress of the Bermuda government. The panel is composed of a team of international experts, chaired by Jonathan Portes, a former government chief economist and UK Treasury official, and now a lecturer in economics and tax policy at King's College in London. Other members of the panel are Marion Bell, a former external member of the Market Policy Committee at the Bank of England, who also previously advised on fiscal matters to the government of Jersey, and Victoria Perry, a U.S. tax lawyer who recently retired from the International Monetary Fund, having spent many years providing technical advice to countries on tax policy and revenue administration. Mr. Speaker, as part of their assessment, the panel met with members of the government, opposition, trade unions, international business, and local business with the aim of listening to a breadth of information and perspectives for their report. As a result, the report contains a comprehensive analysis of Bermuda's fiscal and economic position, its strategy, and related actions. Also, within the report, the panel highlights their assessment of the critical risks facing Bermuda and provides recommendation for several key areas impacting Bermuda's economic outlook. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to advise this Honorable House that after their assessment, the panel endorsed key aspects of the government's fiscal and economic strategy, including the government's commitment to remain within its fiscal guardrails, as well as positioning itself to achieve a balanced budget in 2024-25 and a surplus of $50 million by 2026-27. Within the report, the panel stated that the government has, and I quote, has done well over the past few years to maintain a credible path towards a balanced budget, despite a number of adverse shocks, most obviously the pandemic. Spending has generally been kept under control, and steady revenue growth has therefore largely fed through into deficit reduction, end quote. Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased that the panel envisions the implementation of a corporate income tax regime as having huge potential benefits to the country while acknowledging a number of associated risks. Also, within their report, the panel stated, and I quote, the combination of the introduction of the corporate income tax and relative economic stability means that Bermuda has a chance to put things on a better footing now for the long term. The government's objective that the corporate income tax should not result in an increase in the cost of living or doing business in Bermuda is understandable, end quote. Mr. Speaker, although we may not agree on every recommendation, the government sees value and appreciates the members of the Bermuda Fiscal Responsibility Panel as they represent an independent assessment of the government's financial position, and I urge all honorable members to take note of their report and their recommendations. Mr. Speaker, I will now provide updates on the government's fiscal performance to this Honorable House. Before I give a mid-year update for the current fiscal year 2023-24, it is important to touch on the results from the last fiscal year. Total revenue for fiscal year 2022-23 is projected to be $1.113 billion, which is $35.2 million above the original estimate of $1.078 billion. Current account expenditure is expected to be $953 million, $5.2 million above the 2022-23 original estimate of $945.1 million. And capital account expenditures are projected to be $68.2 million, $4.8 million less than originally budgeted. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that the 2022-23 budget deficit is now expected to be only $46.9 million, which is $23.1 million or 33% below the original estimate of $70 million and $30.4 million below the revised estimate of $77.4 million, which I shared with this Honorable House in February. The projected deficit also represents a $13.1 million reduction compared to the previous fiscal year. It is important to note, Mr. Speaker, that this reduction was achieved in spite of the government not receiving $30.1 million of budgeted revenue due to the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on the aircraft register, foregone customs duty to freeze fuel prices, and foregone customs duty as a result of eliminating duty on essential goods. And in spite of $15.2 million of unbudgeted COVID expenditures and a $15 million grant provided to the Bermuda Hospitals Board and additional funding for firefighters at the airport to ensure we met the necessary requirements to keep the airport open. Mr. Speaker, this demonstrates that despite the global economic challenges, the government's sound fiscal management is resulting in continued progress towards a balanced budget. Mr. Speaker, turning to the current fiscal year, 2023-24, the government's mid-year assessment indicates that total revenue is projected at $1.16 billion, which is on track with the original budget figure. The revenue figure represents continued economic recovery, evidenced by expected increases in tourism-related revenues, payroll tax, and land tax. Mr. Speaker, total current expenditure was revised to be $984.5 million, which is $11.9 million above the original estimate of $972.6 million. The projected increase is primarily due to a further $16.4 million grant to the Bermuda Hospitals Board in support of the hospital. Interest and guarantee management costs projected to be $130.4 million, which is on track with the original budgeted figure, as at this time, there are no unbudgeted or unexpected costs this fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, capital account expenditures are projected to be $85 million, which is $11 million less than the original estimate of $96 million. It is anticipated that underspend in capital account expenditures is mainly due to the availability of construction resources and continuing supply chain delays. Mr. Speaker, the revised budget deficit for the current fiscal year is $44.4 million, which is $900,000 more than the original budgeted figure of $443.5 million. This projected deficit is relatively on track with the original estimates, despite unbudgeted costs associated with the funding boost to the hospital and a negotiated increase in salaries and wages for public officers. Keeping the deficit in line with estimates despite these additional unbudgeted expenses is a laudable achievement. Mr. Speaker, the balance of the sinking fund as of September 2023 was $199.2 million. The Ministry of Finance's aim is to maintain a minimum balance of $100 million in the sinking fund, and therefore, after funding the projected deficit for this year, making the $50 million debt repayment, and with a balanced budget predicted for next year, the government expects to achieve this objective, and the $100 million in the sinking fund will be set aside for future debt repayments. Mr. Speaker, this government continues to demonstrate sound fiscal prudence and the ability to be good stewards of the public purse. Though the opposition may focus on a few missteps, I remind the public and honorable members that no government gets it 100% right 100% of the time. But, Mr. Speaker, we have delivered relief to Bermudians challenged with the highest global inflation seen in 40 years through tax and duty cuts. We've made investments in affordable housing and critical infrastructure. We have maintained our credit ratings. And today, Mr. Speaker, we are repaying $50 million in debt. Thus reducing our gross national debt for the first time in almost 20 years. Yes, Mr. Speaker, things are moving in the right direction. But, Mr. Speaker, the positive news does not stop there. During this year's budget statement, the government pledged to collect at least $7.5 million in back taxes during this fiscal year. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report to this Honorable House and to the people of Bermuda that the Office of Tax Commissioner through the month of November has collected $15.7 million in back taxes, far exceeding the full year budget target. Mr. Speaker, this results of the Office of Tax Commissioner implementing a new debt management system, which has proven to be effective. Mr. Speaker, when we return to this Honorable House next year, it will be for our budget session. And one of the key steps in the budget process is the publishing of a pre-budget report. Earlier today, I tabled the pre-budget report in advance of fiscal year 2024-25 on behalf of the Ministry of Finance. As honorable members will be aware, the pre-budget report is a document produced annually by the government to provide the public with a better understanding of our fiscal aims and objectives, an update on our economy, a summary of the policies under consideration, and to solicit the public's feedback. Mr. Speaker, like most small states and territories, Bermuda's economy is extremely vulnerable to external events, underlining the need for fiscal and financial prudence. This vulnerability is compounded by Bermuda's level of government debt, which is currently at $3.1 billion. Accordingly, this government must take appropriate action to address the problems the island faces head-on. It is also important that stakeholders and citizens understand these challenges, are aware of the factors influencing the government's fiscal policy decisions, and utilize the opportunity to give their views, as it will help to ensure that we achieve the best outcome for Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, the key factors which therefore must be considered in the framing and composition of the 2024-25 budget are as follows. The government's 2020 general election campaign platform and the 2023 throne speech to ensure that the commitments made are appropriately met. Relevant economic considerations, whether globally in relation to our major trading partner, the United States, or the economic realities that exist in the Bermuda context. Taxation sensitivities, recognizing that international business is a key contributor to tax revenue, consideration has to be given to the potential impact of decisions on this sector. The need for continued fiscal discipline to further reduce deficits on the path towards a balanced budget in 2024-25, and ultimate reduction in net debt levels. The requirements for continued investment and support for the initiatives within Bermuda's economic development strategy, the continued effective use of zero-based budgeting and the use of public value assessment outputs to enhance efficiency and cost-effective utilization of resources, the appropriate evaluation of the highlighted risk and implementation of the recommendations from the 2023 report of the Fiscal Responsibility Panel, whose role and work have already been addressed in this statement. And finally, of course, Mr. Speaker, feedback from the pre-budget report consultation. Mr. Speaker, during preliminary discussions with key stakeholder groups, the following policy initiatives were included in the pre-budget report for consideration and feedback. Amendments to the existing new hire relief that is set to expire this year. Consideration to increasing boat licensing fees for large pleasure crafts. Consideration of further reduction to employer payroll tax for the hospitality sector. Consideration of the reduction of immigration fees for work permit applications. Considerations for the reduction of land tax. And considerations towards expanding the list of items subject to customs duty relief. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to emphasize that none of the aforementioned proposals included in the pre-budget report are policy positions of the government. They are simply options put forth for consideration, and the government is inviting the public to be a part of that process by making recommendations for key changes in tax policy or spending priorities. Mr. Speaker, the pre-budget report is an important document that promotes transparency in the budget process, reinforces accountability, and allows for effective collaboration on matters that will have a significant impact on individuals and businesses in the community. As a result, in January, during the consultation period, we will arrange meetings with members of the international business community, Chamber of Commerce, Trade Union Congress, Bermuda Bankers Association, and other key stakeholder groups to ensure the upcoming budget is a reflection of the wider community. Mr. Speaker, it is worth noting that during the consultation period, we also encourage the wider public to read the pre-budget report and submit their thoughts, recommendations, and concerns by email to openbudget@gov.bm or via the government consultation portal, which is found at forum.gov.bm. Once the consultation period is ended on January 17th, we will evaluate all responses as the Ministry of Finance looks to finalize the budget for presentation to the Cabinet and ultimately to this Honorable House. In closing, Mr. Speaker, as we have stated on many occasions, this government is committed to taking care of its people while ensuring its fiscal and economic policies contribute to sustained growth and stability. Our track record has been positively assessed by independent reviewers. Our deficits are narrowing. Our debt is being repaid. Back taxes are being collected, and we remain committed to a path that will ensure a bright future for generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Members, the second statement this morning is also in the name of Mr. Premier. Would you like to, I'm sorry, Deputy Premier, I'm sorry. Is Deputy Premier on the call report? Sorry about that. Deputy Premier, would you like to present your statement at this time?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Right ahead.
Good morning to you and members of the House and listening public.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to inform this Honorable House of Bermuda's representation at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in the United Arab Emirates, otherwise known as COP28. Bermuda's presence at COP28 is important for the highest level of diplomatic engagement for global cooperation and collaboration, which presents an opportunity for Bermuda to build relationships, exchange ideas, and shape outcomes with key figures we normally would not have access to. Mr. Speaker, at COP26, which was in Glasgow 2 years ago, I had the pleasure of leading a delegation of environment ministers across the overseas territories. I again had the honor to be asked to lead the delegation of environment ministers to COP28 in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. At COP26, it was through Bermuda's chairmanship under the United Kingdom Overseas Territories Association, also known as UKATA, that Bermuda took the charge to ensure that British overseas territories had the right to be heard and properly represented at every COP under the UK delegation. Through strong lobbying efforts by UK representatives based in London, our representation increased immensely to ensure that every territory at government level will be afforded a delegation to collectively represent our position. At COP28, all overseas territories were afforded the opportunity to be represented for the first time ever. We have a shared ambition to work towards net zero, as we are all on the front line of climate change. We are custodians of internationally important habitats which span the globe, from the Antarctic to the Caribbean to the South Pacific to the Indian Ocean. Together with the UK, we represent the world's 5th largest marine estate, over 90% of the UK's biodiversity, and are essential to the UK meeting its pledge by 2030 to protect 30% of the world's oceans. Climate change will have a profound impact upon our environments, economies, societies. A failure to act will impact not just us, but our children and all generations to come. To overcome the climate crisis facing our communities, we must increase global solidarity and align our actions. As coastal and island communities, our economies rely upon maintaining healthy, sustainable marine and terrestrial environments. Together, we have committed to take action to protect our fisheries resources and to conserve, wherever possible, restore our marine ecosystems and biodiversity. Building on the good work already taken across the overseas territories, we affirmed an alliance to take action to tackle the harmful effects of plastics pollution and marine litter, often as a result of other countries which have impacted our shores. Our biodiversity, terrestrial and marine, support not only our well-being, but also contribute to our uniqueness. Our nature-based fight against climate change and are important to those of us where tourism makes an important contribution to our economies. Mr. Speaker, Bermuda has committed to a world-leading exclusive economic zone representing 20% of our marine estate, in which there will be no harvesting of resources or other economic activity. We are already seeing significant recovery in the spawning grounds. We are proud to be part of the UK's Blue Shield Oceanic Protection Program. For Bermuda, our net zero priorities are focused on our Integrated Resource Plan, IRP, as it's called, goal to decarbonize energy generation to 85% by 2035, decarbonize transport, public transport, commercial and private, by 2035, making requisite planning building code provisions to decarbonize construction and raise commercial conservation and efficiency levels, embed conservation and efficiency into residential development, focus on better demand-side management amongst residents through an effective future tree planting policy spread over the island for sustainable tree coverage. Mr. Speaker, for the benefit of the Honorable House, I have tabled, Mr. Speaker, and this is the document here I wish to table, that was recently launched at COP28, titled The Bermuda Difference, Bringing Expertise, Resource, and Finance to the World's Biggest Challenge, for the benefit of honorable members and the community. As an island community, vulnerable to the effects of climate change, and as a global capital of climate-related financial risk management, we are determined that Bermuda will participate in the international response to ensure our collective safety and prosperity. To that end, Bermuda is committed to increasing our protection of our fragile ecosystem, reducing our carbon footprint, and mitigating the impact of climate change. As evidenced in the document tabled, the work has already begun. Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to join a panel discussion in the UK Pavilion with the highest level accredited zone, The event was chaired by Minister Graham Stewart, Minister of State for Climate, the Department of Energy, Security, and Net Zero, who also led the UK's negotiations at COP28. The panel entitled, On the Front Line, How Are the UK's Overseas Territories and Crown Dependencies Getting to Net Zero, Adapting to and dealing with the impacts of climate change. The discussion focused on being small islands and the impact of climate change in our territories, our progress, lessons learned, and challenges we face in meeting net zero, and how they incorporate youth perspective in policy making as our future to ensure we can collectively meet our shared ambitions on net zero and the goals of the Paris Agreement. I highlighted that although Bermuda will not adopt the Paris Agreement, we are ever more committed to net zero. We are beyond aspirational with innovation, such as Bermuda's sandbox legislation, which demonstrates this. Bermuda's leadership is exemplified with the decarbonization of public transport, rapid deployment of solar panels on government buildings, waste to energy conversions, and the development of the only wave energy park in the region. Following the panel, I had a frank discussion with Minister Stewart, who was complimentary of Bermuda's accomplishments and global leadership, not just amongst the territories, but across the region with our actions related to protect our climate. The minister highlighted the need for innovation and driving the solutions of the future, and we reflected on the community's experience with the planned deployment of offshore wind. Mr. Speaker, throughout the summit, I was able to speak on several panels with the highest level of accreditation at COP28 and was afforded the opportunity to deliver a keynote address on the first day of the Island Innovation Pavilion, Island of Hope, where I was able to speak about the key role small island states play in preserving ocean health. I highlighted that we are a custodian of a vast marine area, and Bermuda has an important role to play. What is certain, Bermuda is observed among small island jurisdictions as a leader in our approach to tackling climate change. Our dedication through our community, environmental partners, and government departments is admired by many in the region. We need to change the narrative. We are not a small island state, we're a large marine state. Additionally, I was able to support a ministerial panel discussion at the CARICOM Pavilion alongside my counterparts across the overseas territories. We addressed the need to coordinate climate finance across the territories and the challenges non-sovereign jurisdictions face in accessing climate finance. This sentiment is shared not only with British overseas territories, but all non-sovereign territories across the world. Mr. Speaker, it was particularly encouraging to have a formal meeting with the president of COP26, Sir Alex Sharma, MP, in his role as fellow of the Rockefeller Foundation. He was interested in discussing how he could support overseas territories in their relationship with the UK government and with the work of the foundation. His commitment to supporting small jurisdictions who are vulnerable to climate change is highly recognized. I look forward to future collaborative engagements in his new endeavors in the environmental space. Mr. Speaker, while in the UAE, I was keen to support a Bermudian who is making a difference in the climate finance arena, Mr. Kevin Richards. It was important that we encourage the next generation who are providing unique opportunities for job creation and economic diversification for Bermuda. It was encouraging that Mr. Richards was able to host a Bermuda Day to key stakeholders in the UAE, whom have a potential interest to invest in Bermuda. It was a pleasure to support as I delivered a keynote address at an industry-focused Bermuda Day event, highlighting Bermuda's ambitions for COP. The government is supporting innovation in the climate space, including climate finance, and will continue to encourage Bermudians to succeed in this field. Mr. Speaker, the most important accomplishment achieved at COP28 was securing a commitment from the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero through Minister Stewart to support a climate change fund dedicated to the overseas territories. I led the OT delegation in the meeting where we secured the pledge by the minister to explore this commitment with the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and Her Majesty's Treasury. The UK government has recently pledged £100 million of UK funding to support climate vulnerable populations to adapt to climate change. Vulnerable countries will be provided with assistance from the UK government to strengthen the resilience to increasingly frequent and severe effects of climate change. Where it relates to the territories, our UK representative in London will work together with the relevant UK government departments to develop a transparent, dedicated source of climate funding. Mr. Speaker, in addition to all the showcasing of Bermuda's story, we were very much working alongside the UK negotiation team to ensure that OT priorities were properly represented at the table. Each morning, the lead negotiator for the overseas territories met with the delegation. As the UK is our representation on the UNFCCC, we were able to feed into the negotiations on areas including global stocktake, mitigation, adaptation, finance, transparency, and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. As an innovative jurisdiction on the front line of climate change, Bermuda's voice is acknowledged and respected. Mr. Speaker, there was an unprecedented youth interest in COP28. There was, for the first time, a significant delegation of Bermuda youth were in attendance. We are proud of such strong youth voice stemming from Bermuda. In view of this, we are already exploring avenues to increase youth accreditation for Bermudians at COP29, which will be in Azerbaijan. Bermuda's youth delegation included Noel Young, Zane Sinclair, Malachi Simons, Ollie Cherry, William Campbell, and Isaiah Fraser. The Governor of Bermuda London office, supported by Ms. Kimberly Durant, UK representative for the government of Bermuda, and Mr. Brandon Souza, have facilitated Bermuda's presence at previous COPs and will continue to build on this important representation collectively with overseas territories and Bermuda specifically. COP is important to Bermuda, and Bermuda's participation is important to the discussion of addressing climate change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. Members, the next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Works. Minister?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, on numerous occasions, I have risen in this honorable House to provide updates on the continuing roadwork projects across the island, namely the Balco Infrastructure Project, the Ministry of Public Works Water and Wastewater Master Plan Phase 1 works in St. George's, as well as road paving generally. There have been 5 ministerial statements made on this matter since the original project announcements back in February 2020, the most recent being in July of this year. As this is the most pressing issue facing Bermudians, followed closely by housing, I shall continue these reports to keep the motoring public informed of progress. Mr. Speaker, let me begin by apologizing to the people of Bermuda and those who live here and use our roads for the state they are in. They are in a significant state of disrepair, and few of the plans to address this situation have been successful. I will set out the status and plans underway and forthcoming to address this situation. Mr. Speaker, I remind that both the Balco Infrastructure Project and the Water and Wastewater Master Plan Phase 1 works in St. George's are inconvenient and uncomfortable in the immediate for the motoring public. However, the sacrifice is worth the wait because when completed, we will see the protection of our fresh water supplies, protection of our electrical infrastructure, and ensuring that the sewage we produce is properly disposed of in a more environmentally conscious way. Mr. Speaker, while these works are progressing steadily, the final phase of the Belco trenching works from Franks Bay in Southampton to the Evans Bay substation have been paused until the new year. I can report that much of this trenching work will occur on the railway trail rather than the main road, thus providing some relief to those traveling out of the west. The trenching for the Water and Wastewater Master Plan Phase 1 works in St. George's has been completed, and we are in the throes of commissioning the new reverse osmosis and sewage treatment plants, gradually bringing online residents and businesses in St. George's and Southside. Mr. Speaker, accolades must be given to the Department of Works and Engineering's asphalt crews, ably led by Principal Highways Engineer Mrs. Tina Bear-Searle, all of whom have worked tirelessly under very trying conditions to address the magnitude of paving requests and pothole complaints that we have received. This year alone, the Ministry of Public Works asphalt crews have, in conjunction with East End Asphalt, completed repair works for uneven surfaces along Mullet Bay Road, near Stokes Point Road, St. David's Road entrance, Kinley Field Road, Middle Road at Warwick Academy, and Middle Road at St. Anthony's Church. Completed the permanent paving for trenching works at York Street in St. George's, Harrington Sound Road to the Lamington Caves area, Harrington Sound Road from Shark Hill to Painters Road, and Devil's Hill to Harrington Hundreds entrance. Completed the temporary paving of Belco trench work along Middle Road in Warwick and Southampton, Palmetto Road, Earl Military Road, and Frog Lane in Devonshire, and multiple road crossings in St. David's Parish. Completed drainage improvements by creating an asphalt lip on Perimeter Lane at the Glebe Junction and installed a drainage channel at the Glebe bus lay-by to allow for excess rainwater to be redirected into the nearby canal. Resurfaced the netball courts near the W.E.R. Joe Tennis Stadium that are being utilized by schools and the public. Paved the Watford Bridge lanes and fixed hundreds of potholes, most of which were reported to the email at potholes@gov.bm. Mr. Speaker, I can assure this House that the dedicated crews continue their diligence in working to complete the other scheduled works for this financial year, such as Harrington Sound Road in Hamilton Parish, South Road in Southampton near Henry VIII, Middle Road in Warwick near T and Tatum, and South Road at the Collectors Hill Road Junction. Mr. Speaker, I must mention some of the issues the ministry has encountered while undertaking road paving that has contributed to the delays. Mr. Speaker, the government's physical assets are aging. This is not new. Successive administrations have stated this. In this case, the machinery that supports road paving works is also aging and therefore routinely out of service for repairs. The unreliability of these machines, the asphalt plant and asphalt miller in particular, caused the asphalt teams to slow their production. Currently, both assets are out of service and have been for most of this year, awaiting repairs. In addition to this, the excessively complicated administrative procedure to procure asphalting supplies or parts and global supply chain issues have also exacerbated the situation. Simply put, when the machines are working, we may not have the full complement of supplies, and conversely, when they aren't working, we likely have the supplies. Steps are being taken to alleviate both of these challenges. Mr. Speaker, as I've said before, asphalting is an expensive business. The estimated price for paving just 1 kilometer or half a mile of roadway on both lanes is $600,000. These costs are broken down to a single major component, namely the exorbitant price of asphalting material. It currently costs the ministry 62 cents on every dollar used for road paving for this material. However, Mr. Speaker, the key to success is inherently knowing and understanding the circumstances in which one is placed. Hence, the rationale that before the current inoperability of the assets, the ministry entered a partnership arrangement with Eastern Asphalt, the sole private sector provider of bulk asphalt on the island. This arrangement sees the sharing of supplies and usage of paving equipment and staffing resources on an as-needed basis at fixed rates. So currently, Mr. Speaker, the asphalt that our crews are using to pave Harrington Sound Road is purchased from Eastern Asphalt. And occasionally we rent their equipment so that paving works can continue. Additionally, we have an agreement with Eastern Asphalt to carry out paving works on our behalf as well, as recently done for the York Street St. George's paving works. This protocol will continue while we work to get the plant operational again and explore options for the purchase of a new plant. Concurrent with the above activities, over the last few months, on 2 occasions, we have hosted representatives from Aztec Industries, the provider of the current asphalt plant some 20 years ago, and a leading provider of asphalt plants and paving equipment in the United States. Mr. Speaker, this week, a team of 3 experts from Aztec have been on island, out in the field with our asphalting teams, observing the process and the operation of equipment. The full ministry team comprising of myself, the acting permanent secretary, the acting chief engineer, the quarry manager, the principal highways engineer, and others associated with the highways team participated in a full debrief and discussion with the visiting experts on Wednesday last. The full report and recommendation with costings will come in January, but what was discussed was very encouraging. Firstly, Aztec, which is a fully comprehensive construction organization, have a training school for asphalt workers at their headquarters in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and have offered places at the January sessions for several of our workers to attend, which we have accepted. The plan is to train the trainer there and subsequently provide training locally for all highway staff of new techniques and applications to enhance the asphalt laying process. Mr. Speaker, Aztec have identified several new pieces of equipment that can greatly assist us in being able to pave greater lengths of roads in one go. They will present options for a new plant that will be able to deliver asphalt to meet the specific size and demand that Bermuda requires. Technology has advanced significantly since we purchased the current plant 20 years ago, and they will help us bring the current asphalting operations into the modern age. Mr. Speaker, as you know, we are currently in the budgetary process for next year. As is customary, not every dollar that is budgeted for a specific project is spent. So during this process, we are also exploring options to ensure we have enough material and supplies to produce asphalt so that we can accelerate the pace of road paving by transferring funds to the highways budget should the need arise. But until such time that the new equipment arrives, Mr. Speaker, the ministry will continue its efforts with works along Harrington Sound Road heading west towards Middle Road and Flats, along Middle Road to Store Hill, and then along the North Shore Road to the National Sports Center. Mr. Speaker, let me summarize. In January, the paving works will continue with both our highways crew and East End's crew conducting those works with asphalt produced by East End. Overseas technicians will return to repair the current plant so that it is operational until the new plant is purchased and commissioned. The specs and costing for a new plant and equipment will be received and acted upon. An order will be placed for a new plant and various pieces of new equipment. By the second quarter of 2024, the new plant will arrive and be commissioned. In the February budget, additional funding for roadworks will be requested, and during 2024, paving works throughout the island will be increased. Mr. Speaker, I hope this update provides all with a clear understanding of the current situation and plan going forward. We are fully committed to addressing the dreadful state of our roads as quickly as possible. Let me end where I began, Mr. Speaker, by apologizing to all road users for the delayed delivery of these projects and thank the public for their patience and understanding. We will continue our efforts to advance the paving of our roads at an increased pace. As always, Mr. Speaker, I will keep this House and the public informed as we progress. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Members, the final statement this morning is in the name of the Minister for Youth, Social Development, and Seniors. Minister,
Good morning, and thank you, Mr.
good
Speaker.
morning.
Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning as Minister responsible for Gender Affairs to share with this honorable House and the public the goal that CARICOM is working towards to coordinate and accelerate efforts for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women in CARICOM region. Through a first-of-its-kind strategy entitled Stepping It Up, a strategy to achieve gender equality in the Caribbean community, this framework takes an inclusive and equitable approach post-COVID-19 to achieve regional and international commitments which align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 5, gender equality. Mr. Speaker, in 1995, the Fourth World Congress on Women held in Beijing, China, marked a significant pivotal shift for the global agenda for gender equality. The 4 World Conferences on Women united the international community behind a set of common objectives with an effective plan of action for the advancement of women everywhere. At this time, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action that provided an agenda for women's empowerment was introduced. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action set strategic objectives and actions for the advancement of women and the achievement of gender equality in 12 critical areas of concern: women and poverty, education and training of women, women in health, violence against women, women and armed conflict, women and the economy, women in power and decision-making, institutional mechanism for the advancement of women, human rights of women, women and the media, women and the environment, the girl child. This document has been adopted unanimously by 189 countries and is now considered the key global policy document on gender equality. Mr. Speaker, the UN Division for Women, in its review of the 4 World Conferences, stated the fundamental transformation that took place in Beijing was the recognition of the need to shift the focus from women to the concept of gender, recognizing that the entire structure of the need to shift the focus from women to the concept of gender, recognizing that the entire structure of society and all relations between men and women within it had to be reevaluated. Only such a fundamental restricting of society and its institutions could women be fully empowered to take their rightful place as equal partners with men in all aspects of life. This change represents a strong reaffirmation that women's rights were human rights and that gender equality was an issue of universal concern benefiting all. Mr. Speaker, the draft version of this strategy is a mainstream document that is guided by the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and provides a regional coordinated approach. The draft gender strategy sets out the actions that must be taken to reduce existing social and economic inefficiencies that adversely impact the lives of men and women. Mr. Speaker, equality is the foundation of an inclusive, thriving society. However, no nation in the world has achieved gender equality. The draft strategy shows CARICOM's collective commitment to be a beacon of hope, not just in the region, but for the world to follow in achieving equality for all. To ensure the CARICOM region continues its journey to achieve gender equality, the draft strategy focuses on actions to reduce social and economic inequalities that adversely affect the lives of women and men across the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, the strategy's mission is to strengthen the promotion and practice of gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls to enhance regional integration and sustainable development to benefit all people. The goal is to accelerate the effective implementation of priority actions through a regional coordinated approach to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. And Mr. Speaker, the guiding principles of the strategy are human rights foundations, good governance, harmonization, transformative partnership of women and men, and systemic mainstreaming. Mr. Speaker, during the past year, I have been participating in a series of virtual meetings held by CARICOM to gather input from CARICOM members and associate member states for strengthening the draft strategy. The draft strategy was also shared with the chairs of the Gender Affairs Council and the Cabinet for feedback. In October, I was invited by the CARICOM Secretariat, to participate in its 31st special meeting of the Council for Human and Social Development, focusing on gender, which was held virtually. The meeting provided an opportunity to collaboratively review the strategy and discuss its implementation and monitoring framework. The meeting allowed member states and associate members to provide feedback. In attendance were ministers, permanent secretaries, and representatives who shared or reiterated the gender position of their respective countries during the meeting as aligned with their domestic legislation or policies. Mr. Speaker, just last month, CARICOM hosted its 46th meeting of the COHSOD, focusing on gender in Bridgetown, Barbados. CARICOM invited ministers and technical officers to attend the meeting and funded all associated travel costs. The meeting was held on November 20th and 21st. Countries physically represented at the meeting were Bahamas, Barbados, Guyana, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. Those ministers responsible for gender affairs in attendance included Barbados, Guyana, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Speaker, during the two-day meetings, presentations focused on the role of monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning plan for the strategy to ensure output measuring the success of the implementation of the strategy are measurable. This framework will assist in the reporting function of the Sustainable Development Goals. Regional knowledge product that included a CAP model knowledge assessment tool on social gender norms around violence against women and girls training guide and its impact on citizen security and education standards. Member states' obligation to report on CDOR and the ratification of the optional protocol, and a national study on the economic cost of violence against women and girls in Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, the draft gender strategy is structured around 7 thematic areas that provide actionable pillars. 1, gender equality and social inclusion by promoting and protecting the human rights of women through the full implementation of CDOR and other human rights instruments, paying close attention to the most vulnerable or marginalized. 2, freedom of violence through increasing measures to prevent and address all forms of gender-based violence and violence against children and youth. 3, economic empowerment by expanding equitable access for women and men to decent work, economic opportunities, productive resources, and trade. 4, good governance by strengthening good governance processes in the public and private sectors, including women's equal access to and participation in leadership and decision-making at all levels. 5, access to health services by taking steps to reduce risk factors related to maternal mortality, adolescent pregnancy, and HIV/AIDS, particularly through increased access to sexual and reproductive health care services. 6, inclusive quality education by improving the quality of and access to education inclusive of human resource development and gender-responsive learning environments. And 7, sustainable natural resource management responding to gender differentials in access to environmental resources, to maximize benefits, to increase the resilience of women, men, girls, and boys, to the effects and impacts of climate variables. The draft gender strategy is a working document for CARICOM member states to use as a guideline for addressing gender equality that will need to be ratified. Mr. Speaker, in closing, the two-day meeting provided an opportunity for the ministry to contribute to the content of CARICOM gender strategy, gain insightful information about gender affairs, and network with other ministers in the CARICOM region on broader gender-related matters, which in turn will help in the development of a gender affairs structure in Bermuda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, that brings us to an end of the statements for this morning. We'll now move on to the next order on the order paper, which is the reports of committees. And we have one report this morning, that's the Private Bills Committee report on the Meanwhile Insurance Bitcoin Limited Act 2023. And it's MP Adams is going to present it this morning.
Morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
To the Honorable, the President and members of the Senate, to the honor, the Speaker
House,
and
to the
members
House.
of the House of Assembly. The Parliamentary Joint Select Committee on Private Bills has the honor to submit the following report. The committee has carefully considered the petition together with the related bill for the act listed hereunder and is satisfied that the bill is a private bill and that all the rules of both houses having to do with private bills have been complied with. The act is entitled the Meanwhile Insurance Bitcoin Bermuda Limited Act 2023, which was originally entitled Standard Crypto Insurance Bitcoin Bermuda Limited Act 2022. The committee recommends that the bill entitled Meanwhile Insurance Bitcoin Bermuda Limited Act 2023 be accepted, subject to agreed amendments. Subject to the recommendations contained in paragraph 2 above, the committee recommends that the prayers of the petitioners be granted and that leave be given to bring in the proposed bill to give effect thereto, all of which is respectfully submitted by the Joint Select Committee of the Honorable Derek Burgess, the Chair, Ianthea Simmons-Wade, JP MP, Scott Pearman, MP, myself, Josh A. Adams, MP, Senator Kieran Bell, JP, and Senator Ariana Hudson. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. That's the only reports of committees this morning. We'll now move on. And the next item on the order paper is the question period. Members, ministers, there are two members who have questions from statements this morning. And we'll start with MP Pearman, who has a statement for the Premier on his first statement, in reference to the mid-year financial update.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, Honorable Premier and Minister of Finance. In respect of your statement about the $50 million that's being paid, when is the $50 million being paid now due under the relevant loan note?
Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The $50 million is due today, and funds were transferred to Butterfield Bank yesterday to ensure that they did not charge the government any extra interest in saying that the payments may have been delayed. So the funds have been transferred. The funds consisted of $51.2 million, $50 million on the principal and $1.2 million on the half-year interest, as interest on the $50 million is payable twice a year. Therefore, as stated in the statement, our annual interest expense will now reduce by $2.4 million, and gross debts will fall for the first time in over 20 years.
Supplementary or new question?
Supplementary. So if it is due today, the government is in fact complying with a contractual obligation, yes?
I think the learned member would know the answer to that question. I'm trying to understand what his point is. Maybe he'll get to it in the follow-up.
Second sub?
Yes, second supplementary. I've been asked to clarify why I asked that question. The government had portrayed this as if they were getting ahead of the game, but in fact, they're doing what they were obliged to do, correct?
Mr. Speaker, as we see again, they cannot help themselves. I can assure you if the government of Bermuda had to refinance this debt and did not have the funds because there were no money in the bank, they would be making a whole pile of noise, but they can't even bring themselves to say, job well done. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, that unlike the record of the One Bermuda Alliance, who said that they were going to borrow $800 million, which would last their entire term of office, and then went back to the bank to borrow more money 3 years later because they could not control the spending and lay out the commitments of which they had. This government has taken a different path, ensuring that we have the funds in place and are progressing towards a balanced budget. And may I remind the honorable member that if it was not for the pandemic and their failed Morgan's Point project, which has cost the government more than $200 million, the budget would have been well balanced and we would have had, Mr. Speaker, far lower interest rate payments than we do now. So the honorable member may wish to try to say, oh, the government isn't doing anything. The fact is, if we did not make this payment, if we had to roll over this debt, they would have been saying they aren't doing it. They can't have it both ways, Mr. Speaker, but they try to do it every time.
New question?
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
Second question.
Yes, yes. It appears I struck a nerve today, but there we are. Second question, Mr. Speaker. And I didn't say the government isn't doing anything. I said the government is doing what it's obliged to do. Second question, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Premier and Minister of Finance, this $50 million is coming out of the sinking fund. And in fact, what happened is the government borrowed more than was needed last time and set aside the $50 million being paid now. And so do you agree that in fact the net debt, which is gross debt, that's the sinking fund, will be left unchanged by this action? Net debt will be left unchanged.
All right.
Mr. Speaker, that was mentioned in my statement.
Supplemental,
Yes.
the fact that it was mentioned in your statement, do you agree that net debt is unchanged?
I think the fact that it was included in the statement speaks for itself.
With respect, Mr. Speaker, I can include something in a statement, doesn't say I agree or disagree. I'm inviting you to agree with the statement.
I would want to think that the statements that the ministers bring here are statements that they are in agreement with. It's their statement. It's their statement that they've drafted and brought to the House. Members. Thank you. I would want to think any minister that's bringing a statement here is bringing something to the House that they have in support of and in agreement with.
Well, thank you for clarifying the point that net debt has not actually been reduced. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No further questions.
Thank you. Premier, the next question is also for you. It's from MP Dunkley. MP Dunkley, would you like to put your question?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to all the colleagues. I thank the Honorable Premier for the statement and the update today. A few questions to the Honorable Premier. Honorable Premier, I believe on page 2 of your statement, the second paragraph in bold, as you talk about spending, it says spending has generally been kept under control. Can you give us some feedback on what the word generally means? Obviously, the Fiscal Responsibility Panel must have some concerns in there, but I do appreciate the update. And it is clear that there has been some effort and some success in getting expenses under control by the report, but I'd just like to know what the concerns are raised so we can be aware of them for the future.
Thank you, Premier.
Mr. Speaker, it is lovely to see that at least some members of the opposition can recognize when progress is being made. So I welcome the comments of the honorable member. What I would say, Mr. Speaker, is that this report was tabled in this honorable House for members to read. It is available on the government's website for persons to see. But I think the important point to note in this case is that unlike last year, where the Fiscal Responsibility Panel said that they do not believe that the government spending projections can be met, they said they were too aggressive in making sure that we constrained our spending. In this year, they admitted that they may not have been entirely accurate in what they thought and commended the government for keeping spending in control while increasing revenues, leading towards deficit reduction. This is an independent report, so the honorable member is asking me to opine on why those persons said that. I know that their members do reach with them, their members are in contact, and they are perfectly happy to go ahead and reach out for clarification. This is a quote from the report that is from an independent body, and members of the public and also members of the Honorable House can read it, as I know it is on all members' tablets.
Supplementary or new question?
New question. I
Okay.
appreciate the answer from the Premier, and the opposition will reach out and get some clarification, as the Premier suggested. Second question to the Honorable Premier. Honorable Premier, on page 2 and page 3 of your statement, you refer to 15 million being granted to the hospital board in additional funding and 16 million being granted in this fiscal year for additional funding to the hospital, Bermuda Hospital Board. Honorable Premier, going forward in the budget for next year, what is going to be done to alleviate the financial challenges within the hospital? It's clear that there are sustainability issues as far as hospital financing is concerned, and we must get it right. Appreciate any update the Premier can give. Specific question, how are we going to address the hospital funding next year to make sure that the block grant meets the funding required, or what additional measures will be taken to meet those financial challenges?
Premier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the question. I'm just chuckling to myself as I remember when we used to sit in another place, and there were questions asked about the future, and we used to, bring out the fake crystal ball. I cannot state as to where we will be in February, but I do know the Honorable Minister of Health will happily update the House when we get to the budget debate and budget matters related to that. I know that the Ministry of Health is currently analyzing those particular matters. These funds, as stated in the budget statement, were funds that were not paid previously to the hospital, but were due to the hospital, and we wanted to make sure they got that particular cash. We've made sure we provided that particular cash while, as stated, remaining inside of budget targets. And as a reminder for the listening public, though we did give an additional $15 million, which was unbudgeted last year, our deficit came down and was significantly below the estimates that were given to the House last year. And that is a testament to the sound fiscal management, the tight expense controls of which the government has continued to maintain. And I'm sure that the Honorable Minister of Health will update this Honorable House on the matters related to fiscal sustainability at Bermuda's Hospital Board. And I'm certain that there'll be a very long and large debate on that in the budget session.
Thank you. Supplementary or third question?
Supplementary, Mr.
Yes.
Speaker. Thank the Honorable Premier for that. Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. The Premier says that we'll have a long debate during the budget next year. So a question in advance, because we talked about this a bit in the question period last year. How was it overlooked that money that was budgeted for the hospital was not paid in the appropriate time frame?
Premier?
Mr. Speaker, in the spirit of good will amongst men in the Christmas season, I'm not going to try to throw stones at things which may or may not have happened prior to my returning to the Ministry of Finance. Nonetheless, what I will say is that those funds have now been paid, and we are making sure. There are difficult decisions that have to be made, Mr. Speaker. We have to deal with cash. People are saying that we were inside of a pandemic. And so it is not something that I know what the opposition is trying to get at. What the reality is that the funds have now been paid. The hospital does have their money that they were supposed to get underneath the block grant, and they've been made whole. During the pandemic, the money may not have been there. There were less people that were employed. Therefore, there was a shortfall in the money that went to the hospital. And the question is whether or not the hospital took up that shortfall or the government made up the shortfall from general revenues and not from health insurance receipts. We've made the decision to fund that money and to take it out of the general fund to ensure that the hospital continue to operate. And I think that all persons would recognize that that is the right and correct decision, especially when the opposition is saying that the government should meet its commitments. In this case, we have. It was a difficult decision to make, but we made sure that we met those commitments because we believe that it's right and proper to do, because everyone believes that our only hospital should be properly funded.
Second sub or third question?
Second sub. 100% support the Premier. The hospital must be funded. We've spoken about this for extended periods of time, Mr. Speaker. And in the spirit of goodwill, I won't carry that any further, but I caught the stone that was directed in that direction, Mr. Speaker. Second supplementary question. Does the Honorable Premier believe that the block grant is the way forward for funding of the hospital?
Mr. Speaker, there is no stone. That's just reality. Making decisions in finance is difficult. Making sure that you meet budget targets, having adequate cash, and governing a country and running a ministry in a pandemic is difficult. But the record of this government, whether it is myself as Minister of Finance or the prior Minister of Finance, shows that we have consistently met our budget targets by being fiscally responsible. So on the matter of the block grants and other issues going forward, I'll refer to the earlier statement of which I made. And that earlier statement is, I am certain that those matters will be fully discussed and debated in the budget time. And if the honorable member does have specific questions for the Minister of Health or wishes to meet with the honorable Minister of Health, I'm sure if he sends a question or makes that request to the honorable Minister of Health, will be happy to meet with the honorable member to discuss the matters of which he has. As I said in an earlier answer, those matters are currently being reviewed and they will be brought to the House when they are complete.
Third question.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Premier on page 4 of the statement refers to the government pledge of 7.5 million in back taxes to be collected in this fiscal year and updates this Honorable House that so far 15.7 million in back taxes have been collected through November. I'd like to congratulate the Office of the Tax Commissioner and the government for making this happen. Certainly that is welcome news. If people owe money, we need to pay it, because if we don't pay it, other people are covering for those who run from their responsibilities. I know there's hardship that goes around in the community, but we need to collect taxes. So to the Honorable Premier, with the job being done, with some good results, to the Honorable Premier, what are the expectations going forward from this government on the collection of back taxes?
Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I will just state for the honorable member that when the Ministry of Finance does analysis as we're going through the budget session, we will make further commitments and budget announcements that will be made. I accept the congratulations from the opposition, the fact that we had set a target, and for full note and knowledge, the original target that we'd set was $10 million. It was stated by the tax commissioner that that may be too aggressive, so we reduced it to $7.5 million. But the fact that we're up to $15.7 million for the month of November is testament to the investments that have been made in the Office of the Tax Commissioner, in the work that has been done in the Ministry of Finance by the prior finance minister, and continued now to make sure that we are collecting back taxes. And so what we have seen here is a continued effort to address these particular challenges. And what we will do is we will update the public on new targets, and those targets will be set out in the budget statement that will be delivered in February. But it is unquestioned that the investments that have been made have made it easier and better and more efficient for the department to collect back taxes. And we are giving up to our commitments that have been made to the taxpayers of this country, so significantly international business who raise this issue every year. And this government, once again, is demonstrating that it can deliver.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Thank you for that succinct answer by the Honorable Premier. Mr. Speaker, my last question, supplementary, well, depending how the Honorable Premier answers it. What is the outstanding balance of unpaid collectible taxes at the present time?
Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I don't have that information off the top of my head.
Will the Premier endeavor to obtain it to the House?
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure those matters will be covered in the budget statement, but if the honorable minister or honorable member wants to submit a specific parliamentary question, we'll endeavor to get the research done in advance of the budget statement and provide it.
Happy to submit a parliamentary question, but I'd have to wait until the budget debate next time. I'm asking the Honorable Premier if maybe I could send an email to the Honorable Premier and he could remind members in the Office of the Tax Commissioner to submit the balance. I'd be happy to do it that way.
Okay. Okay. The Premier gave a response to it, so you work from there. Okay. Thank you, Premier. Those were the only questions for you this morning. The next statement that has questions is that from the Minister of Youth, Social Development and Seniors. Minister MP Jackson has a question for you. MP Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, members and the listening public. I just had one question for the minister. When she was reviewing and participating in the CARICOM draft gender strategy, I'm wondering, were there any particular areas that the minister felt would be most useful for Bermuda? Are there any particular areas within the strategy that she has highlighted as being a priority for Bermuda?
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did mention in the statement in regards to the actual thematic areas of the gender strategy, and it's really to make sure that Bermuda, with their own terms of reference with our Gender Affairs Council, is aligning with other jurisdictions as it relates to strategies for gender equality. And so that would include the 7 pillars that I mentioned of gender equality and social inclusion, freedom from violence, economic empowerment, good governance, access to health services, inclusive quality education, sustainable natural resource management. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Supplementary?
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
No further questions? Thank you, members and ministers. That brings us to an end of the question period this morning, and we'll now prepare to move on. The next item on the agenda, and let me set the clock for that. The next item is the congratulatory and obituary speeches. Does any member wish to speak to that? MP Swan?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on congrats and obits to be associated with an obituary brought by the Deputy Speaker last week. It was came to my attention that through his obituary that Mr. David Ralston had passed away. And I felt certainly a huge welling in my heart to associate myself with that, but more so to speak to Mr. David Ralston's passing, which was very personal to me, in that when I came home from university and worked at Castle Harbor, Mr. David Ralston was the most extraordinary golf course superintendent I'd ever met and have ever met. Came to Bermuda from Scotland and assimilated with Bermuda like no other I've ever seen, to such the extent that he took a workforce of migrant workers from the Azores and blended them in with workers in Pakistan, Bermudians, in a harmonious way that a textbook could be written about. And his extraordinary methods meant that he had a Scottish, Portuguese, Azorean dialect that his workers could understand, where persons who were golf course superintendents traditionally would drive the newest vehicle around maybe and go around and see. He rode that little bike around Castle Harbor in Pakistan, no helmet, shorts in the winter. He had relationships with everybody through his connections, through both the Lodge and Rotary Club. He put on many charitable events down in the stables, which were housed many cars in Pakistan. Many black tie events were held down at the stables that raised thousands of dollars to help charities. He played football, as the Honorable Deputy Speaker spoke of, for St. George's, and he was just a great man. But he was the person, Mr. Fix-It, in a way in which if you had an industrial problem in management level, you went to him, and he would walk into the office down there, the GM, and represent for many persons, all persons. And I just want his family to know that David Ralston was well respected and loved by many, including myself. And I just pray that his family will be comforted by words of his great contribution to Bermuda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? MP Dickerson,
Mr. Speaker,
you have your 3 minutes.
I won't require that much time. Speaker, I rise this morning to ask the House convey hearty congratulations on the 98th birthday of Mrs. Isola Harvey.
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Harvey, as many will know, was a member of the Progressive Group, and I would dare say part of the group was responsible for the expansion of rights for all the people of Bermuda to live equally. And so I asked that we send her a note, especially this year, in light of the fact that she lost her husband of 68 years earlier this year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
So I think the whole House will be associated with that. Yes. MP Simmons, would you like your 3 minutes?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and
Go
thank
right
you.
ahead.
I would love to be associated with the remarks about my constituent, Mrs. Zola Harvey, and join in the congratulations and gratitude for her contribution towards moving Bermuda forward and for helping make it a more equitable place. While on my feet, I'd also like to acknowledge and praise Ms. Tawana Dean Swan, the headmistress of Dalton E. Tucker Primary. I'm sure many members will be glad to associate themselves with the remarks I am about to say. I had the pleasure of first meeting her as a newborn MP in 2014, and as many of my constituents' children attend the school, we built a very strong relationship. And traveling up and down the island, you'd see many schools, and you were able to compare and contrast. And the leadership of Ms. Dean, it created an environment of love, of discipline, of structure, and of community. And she will be truly missed, and her successor has truly big feet to fill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? MP Cannoneer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning, colleagues. Just like to send condolences to the family of Steve Parks. As you read in the paper, better known as Carpenter. We had an extensive spent an extensive amount of time together on trying to address the many challenges that we are having with our youth. And he actually was part of the solution. And it's sad to see that he has suffered of trying to be in the midst of us being someone who would bring about solution to the issues that we are facing with our youth. We had set aside buildings that we were looking to renovate, and we were going to use those buildings for a training ground for many of these youths. What the public may not be aware of is that also he was looking to renovate the building in St. George's. If you read in the paper, you would see where Sophia Cannoneer is going to be moving down there, and he was going to use that building as well, along with some of the individuals that were involved, like Corin Smith and Glad Simmons and the likes, who have been trying to put together programs for many years now. But we did spend quite a bit of time with Steve and being a part of the solution. So it's really sad to see that he suffered and has passed away here under what I would say horrific circumstances. And we need to send condolences to the family for loss of someone who's trying to be a part of the solution. A good man. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Lister, you have your 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
To the listening audience, fellow colleagues. I would like to start off by associating myself to comments made by MP Jamel Simmons in regards to Ms. Tawana Dean. Declaring interest, she is family. So when I did read that she had been an educator for 38 years, that's my entire life, Mr. Speaker. So the 38 years is a long time to commit to being an educator and to make it to being a principal. So again, just want to congratulate her on the 38 years of service that she put into public education in Bermuda. On that note, Mr. Speaker, yesterday, the Great Christmas Carol was held at the LF Wade International Airport. I wasn't in attendance, but I just want to congratulate and recognize all of these students and all the different schools that participated. And I hope you'll vote for the school. I will declare my interest. I will be voting for Bermuda Institute. But congratulate to all of the schools and students that participated, that they did a good job. While I was at the airport, Mr. Speaker, many Bermudians are well known for being well traveled. As small as we are, we get around. You can go to any country in this world and almost find a Bermudian and know of Bermudians there. On that note, Mr. Speaker, I also want to congratulate and declare my interest to my uncle, former Member of Parliament, Mr. Terry Lister, who also received recognition for being one of only 6,000 odd people on this earth to have received a certificate for visiting 100 countries in his lifetime. He received a certificate. I cannot remember the name of the exact organization, but they keep track of those that have traveled to a minimum of 100 countries. And he reached that milestone recently, and he was rewarded that acknowledgement for I would say I haven't been on any of the trips with him yet. But as I said, Bermudians are well traveled, and out of the 7 billion odd people, only 6,000 odd people reached that milestone of traveling to 100 countries on this earth. So again, I want to just recognize him for that achievement, and hopefully one day many more Bermudians can join that achievement. I've lost track. I've maybe on 20 or so countries, Mr. Speaker, so I have a long ways to go to catch him up. But hopefully one day I might be able to join that prestigious group of 100 of people that have visited 100 countries at least on this earth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. MP Ming. Morning. You have your 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and listening audience. This morning I rise with a very heavy heart. St. George's lost an icon, a legend today, actually. Janet Smith, she's the wife of Ross Smith, Ross Smith. Anyone who knows Janet knows that she goes over and beyond within our community. She is dependable. She doesn't like to be out front. She works tirelessly behind the scenes. Anything that's community that's going on, Janet is there. She helped for 2 years with my feeding program, even on the days when she wasn't feeling well. She assists with the walk to Calvary. She's an active member in Richard Allen AME Church. And in our small but ever-tight community of St. George's, I can tell you that she'll be missed. And yes, and the fact that she was a nurse, well, she gave even so much more of herself to community, because we've had constituents who had need things redressed and they couldn't get the district nurse to come. Janet would be the one that you could call, and she would come and she would offer her services free of charge, never being anything but love and encouraging. So today, St. George's has lost a legend, a great person. I know what she would want us to do, and that would be to stay encouraged, because I know for me, she encouraged. She sent me a message every single day. And it's unfortunate. She'll be missed, but she'll also be remembered. And I hope that we can be half the people that half a person of what she was in terms of how she encouraged and the things that she did within her community. I know that some of what I am today, because she's part of what I would call my village. And we often talked about how we treat and act within our communities. Mr. Speaker, and I'd also like to just do a congratulatory thing. Last week I attended the RAA, and in St. George's Town again, seniors Christmas lunch. Excellent time, well organized. We had some active seniors out there. I'd like to associate MP Swan if there's comments. He actually busted out in a little tune. Better keep his day job. And the Corporation of St. George's hosted the Santa Comes to Town, another successful event, a draw into the community. So, and I also want to thank the Corporation of St. George's workers, because if you haven't visited St. George's and had a look at the lights thunder, then you're truly missing it. There's nowhere else in the island that looks half as fabulous as St. George's stores right now. So if you haven't visited, and I hope the listening audience is here, you can come in, you can have a visit to the town, and also you can visit the Winter Wonderland at Summers Gardens. So, Mr. Speaker, on that note, thank you.
Thank you, MP Ming. Before I acknowledge MP Simmons Reid, I'd just like to acknowledge that in the gallery This morning, we have former Senator Parent Chief, Phil Parent Chief. Good to see you in the House this morning. Good. MP Simmons, Wade, you have your 3 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker and the listening public. I'd like to give congratulations over some of the Christmas programs this year. Vernon Temple's Sunday school program brought me actually to tears to see the young people who are still going to church and seeing the grandmothers and grandparents, aunts, and everyone that came to support them. I'd also like to congratulate Bright Temple on their candlelight service, which was held on Sunday. Congratulations today, although I missed it. Purvis Primary School children did a carol-a-run in Warwick. They went to homes, they went to Lorraine Rest Home. They also went to anyone they could find walking around doing their jingle bell. And that was good because today was the last day of school, and because it rained yesterday, they said they were going to give up their Christmas party and still go and do the neighborhood. I'd also like to congratulate Summer Haven on their Christmas event, which was held last night. They have been doing this for the last almost 40 years, 22 years of which I was there to support them. They had a great support from the community, not just individuals, families that were there, but also individuals, families that had lived there and had passed. Now, Mr. Speaker, I had basically said before that I would always give congratulations to my seniors that are over the age of 65. It's interesting because I have 1,266 constituents, and I have 448 seniors in my constituency, which is 35% of the seniors. So birthday wishes to Cora Woods, who went 89, birthday wishes to George Hopkins, who went 70, and William Mayo, who went 75. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Fogo, you have your 3 minutes.
Good day, Mr. Speaker. Good day to the House and good day to the listening public. First, I would like to be associated with the remarks from MP Renee Ming in expressing condolences for Janet Smith, who in many ways became a matriarch in the St. George's area, and she was known for her service. So I would also like to be associated with the remarks for the St. George's Corporation and the excellent work that they do in making what people try to call St. George's a ghost town, but recreating and bringing youth, vitality, and all of that back to St. George's, where everything began from the get-go. And we're winning cup match next year. So
I think we've heard that wish a few times, but
so, Mr. Speaker, but I do stand today to give congratulatory remarks to two great schools in the Eastern area. East End Primary for an excellent concert yesterday evening, and St. David's Primary for another first-class Christmas concert. Both schools are small, but let me say this. They are both mighty. Not only do they turn out excellent students, but they also, whenever they do anything, they do it with a bang. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
thank you, MP Fogo. MP Kins, would you like to have your 3 minutes? Go right ahead.
If it pleases you, Mr. Speaker.
Go right ahead.
I'd like to ask that a letter of condolence be sent to the family of Kalen Jamal Charles Althworth Ferbert. He was a resident of Cedar Park, died in his 53rd year. We attended the Prospect Primary School together. He was in our community. He was one of our community DJs. Everyone got along with him very well, a significant loss to our community. And on behalf of the constituency 14 and the Progressive Labour Party, I ask that a letter of love and support be sent to his family. And congratulations, I would like to acknowledge the Prospect Primary School. My alma mater, the school is led by Dr. Richardson, Dr. Holly Richardson. She has been at Prospect Primary, and you see the breadth and the excellence in her leadership. I had the privilege of attending their Christmas play this year. Just to see all the families so excited, lined up outside, eagerly awaiting to get inside. The children, they were turned out immaculately. Mr. Bean was their music teacher. Just to see him take all the primary years through the beautiful songs and had a bell choir. Miss Furtado, she also was one of the teachers that let out. I would like a letter of congratulations, not only to be sent to the head teacher and the two teachers that I mentioned, but to the entire staff. And I would like to acknowledge all the parents that made sure that the young people learned their parts and that they were on time and that they were immaculately turned out. It was such a community-based event, but it was good to see a school that was inclusive, the special needs students, the academic students, everyone was put together in a play that highlighted the importance of Christmas and the importance of us working together as a community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. MP Keynes, is any other member wish to make it? Minister Reese, you
Thank
have
you,
your
Mr.
3
Speaker.
minutes.
Good morning to you. Mr.
Morning.
Speaker, I'd like to start off my remarks by associating myself with the member from C14 who spoke of Kaylin Furbert. It's a person that I've known for a long time, and like Mr. The MP said, Kaylin, no, that's a Central guy. Yeah, Central is where it all began, Mr. Speaker. For those that don't know. Yes, but Kaylin Furbert was really the neighborhood DJ, and this can be a great miss. Mr. Speaker, I also want to be associated with the remarks for Steve Parks. Unfortunately, he is the 4th murder in Bermuda this year. I didn't know Mr. Parks personally, but I knew his wife and his sons. You know, and they were just eulogizing his wife's father just on Friday going, and the following Monday, her husband was brutally shot and murdered. So my heart goes out to the Parks family, and like Mr. Cannoner had said, Mr. Parks is one of those gentlemen that was trying to be a part of the solution in addressing the current behavior that we are facing as a country. Mr. Speaker, on a positive note, I want to, before I sit down, Harrington Psalm Primary School was also in this caroling contest at the airport, and it'd be remiss of me not to get my vote, and like others have said, I cast my vote down at Harrington Sound Primary for obvious reasons, Mr. Speaker. All right, and but before I take my seat, Mr. Speaker, as a St. George's transplant right now, before I sit down, I must associate it with the remarks from the MP from C1 and talk about the lights down at St. George's and down the square. They are very beautiful, Mr. Speaker, and those that have not seen it, I would suggest that you take a drive down there during this holiday season. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish? Government Whip, Mr. Terrell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to you and colleagues. Mr. Speaker, in the first instance, I'd ask that condolences be sent to the family of the late Lucille May Evans of Lightburn Drive in Warwick. Ms. Evans obviously was a constituent of mine and also a friend of mine as well, because we had many personal chats. And so I would ask that condolences specifically be sent to her daughter Lisa and her grandson Nazil, who certainly will miss her. She came from a very, very large family, so I'm sure others will miss her as well. And I should also mention she had a connection with the Salvation Army, so she was widely known. One of the things about Miss Evans was very comical. Whenever we met, she either started off with this quote or ended with this quote. And I'd like to say it, Mr. Speaker, if you don't mind. She would say, "Peace in the heart and peace in the head." And as I said, I don't know where she got it from, but she would always say it to me whenever we met. On a more lighter note, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that congratulations be sent, because it's the season for candlelight services, to the Warwick Holiness Church, also in Warwick, under the leadership of my good friend, Dr. Everett Weeks and Lady Weeks, who had their candlelight service on Sunday going. And because I was at the candlelight service in Devonshire, I didn't attend, but I was told by several of the neighbors and my constituents that it was well attended and a very good evening was had by all. So I do congratulate he and his congregation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Government Whip. Mr. Terrell, does anyone else wish to make a contribution at this time? MP Anthony Richardson, I see you jump to your feet. You have your 3 minutes.
Sure, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to say, others say, I'm not going to take my 3 minutes today, that's for sure. I want to add my compliments, though, to all the schools that participated at the Skyport, I want to call it a schools challenge. I actually was present yesterday. And what was amazing is, as you drove up, the parking lot was full. And the first question was, well, what's going on? I mean, you go inside, the children, and they were young children, right? And what was amazing is their tremendous energy and what attitude was that they were there at a time when the actual airport was full, people leaving. And so it was really a treat to see how they were able to entertain the departing passengers in such a tremendous way. And as you know, when young people are involved, all the parents are there. And so you have all the cameras going, the click, 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 and then the passengers actually cheered when they finished singing, which made it even more so. And I will say, Mr. Aaron Adderley is the president of Skyport, and I was talking to him in that they had a significant plan whereby the children were bused to the airport. They then actually received free lunch before they went back. And so the children, of course, were tremendously overjoyed. And clearly, though, I also add my congratulations to Summerhaven, Harrington Primary School, for what they are doing in the community as they actually enrich the community by the people that they serve. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Richardson. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? None other? Before we move on, I'd just like to add a couple of comments to some of the remarks that were made. First, I'd like to start off with supporting the remarks made by MP Dickerson this morning in reference to Mrs. Harvey, who's celebrating her 98th birthday. And much can be said about the contribution that her and the organization that she was associated with has done to bring Bermuda forward in the way that the accomplishments that, as they started, seemed almost impossible in some areas, but through their diligence and commitment, it was accomplished. Mrs. Harvey has been one of those figures that have been in my life as long as I can remember. So I give her my best wishes today in reaching this milestone of 98. Also, to the comments that were made in reference from MP Jamal Simmons for Mrs. Dean, former principal at the Southampton Glebe. You know, we grew up at a time when extended family was a regular practice of how we grew up. And Ms. Dean was part of that extended family in my household. She's a cousin, but she grew up in my house quite often. And I'm pleased with the contribution that she's been able to give to Bermuda and as a leading figure in our education system and the impact that she's had on many young lives. So I support the congratulations that have been extended to her. And lastly, on a sad note, to the family, the Smith family in St. George's, for the passing of Janet Smith. When I first became involved with this political circle, her husband Ross was one of those who were very active in the East End, and I got to build a good relationship and friendship with Ross through that. And I understand, recognize the contribution that he and his wife together have made in the community. And I just want to express my condolences on the loss of their mother to the children and grandchildren as well. With those remarks, we'll move on. The next item on the order paper this morning is matter of privilege. There are none. Personal explanations. There are none. Notice of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance. There are none. Introduction of bills. We have two bills to be introduced this morning, and the Premier will introduce the first. Both bills are premiers, actually.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Please, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, under the provisions of Standing Order 48, I move to withdraw the bill entitled the Corporate Income Tax Act 2023 that was tabled on Friday, December 8th, 2023.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm introducing the following bill, which according to Section 36(3)(a)(1) of the Bermuda Constitution requires the governor's recommendation so that it may be placed on the order paper. The Corporate Income Tax Act 2023, and I'll move that Standing Order 29-1 be suspended so that it may be taken up at a later point in the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm introducing the following bill for its first reading so that it may be placed in the order paper for the next day of meeting. The Investment Business Amendment Act 2023.
Thank you. Now, Ms. That brings us to the covering of all the bills to be introduced today. Notice of motions, there are none. Now, members, we'll move on to the orders of the day. And it's been agreed by both sides that there will be an adjustment to the order. Items 3 and 4 will be done as 1 and 2. And we'll start with item 3 as number 1, and that's the consideration of the Tourism Investment Aerial Sands Order 2023 in the name of the Junior Minister of Tourism, Culture, and Sport. Junior Minister Swan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I move that consideration be given to the draft order entitled Tourism Investment Aerial Sands Order 2023. Proposed to be made by the Minister responsible for tourism under Section 3 of the Tourism Investment Act 2017 with the written agreement of the Minister of Finance in exercise of the power conferred by Section 5 of the Tourism Investment Act 2017.
Are there any objections to the Junior Minister proceeding? None? Continue.
Smith, I move that draft order.
Yes.
No, yeah, yeah.
I
Thank you,
beat
Mr.
to the
Speaker.
punch on that one. Continue.
That was one of Dr. Braun's 1-minute briefs. Mr. Speaker, the purpose in bringing this tourism investment aerial sands order 2023 before this honorable house is to enable the grant of tax relief to the developers investing in the tourism product Aerial Sands Limited, which is in the national economic interest of Bermuda. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to invite this honorable house to take this order under consideration. Mr. Speaker, a key element of success in business is investment in the product to ensure it is always fresh and serves to meet the demands of the customer that business aims to serve. Mr. Speaker, the hospitality business is no different. Destinations, hotels, and attractions that seek to trade only on reputation can often lose their edge, proving to be more of what they were than what they need to be. Success in this aggressive and competitive tourism marketplace demands that every affiliated tourism business consistently stays cutting edge. Mr. Speaker, the order before the honorable members today presents that kind of investment in a product proposed to be made by a key tourism site in Bermuda. Aerial Sands Limited is a Bermuda-registered company and a joint venture between Michael Douglas, Hollywood actor, and JTRE Holding. JTRE Holding was founded by Peter Corbacca, who has been in the real estate market for over 25 years, operating in the United Kingdom, Central Europe, and Asia. JTRE Holdings' mission for Aerial Sands is to create a successful tourism product that will create jobs, become an employer of choice, delight guests, and most importantly, increase awareness of Bermuda as an important destination for leisure and business. Further, Mr. Speaker, Aerial Sands Limited's vision is to convert the 13.8-acre beachfront plot into a unique 131 key 5-star lifestyle hotel resort consisting of 21 private 5-star villas, 33 hotel suites, and 30 condo hotel suites and amenities, including pools and a pickleball court. This resort will be operated internationally by internationally recognized operator, the Kempinski Hotel Group. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will note that the terms of the order are consistent with the Tourism Investment Act 2017 and provide relief sought for a period of 15 years. That relief is set out in Clause 3 of the order and again is consistent with the Principal Act, which was amended in 2023 to permit the minister responsible for tourism greater discretion in the granting of relief. Mr. Speaker, I would invite the attention of honorable members to Clause 4 of the order, which sets out the important means by which the hotel qualifies for the exemption from employer's share of the payroll tax, which is that a management trainee program is in operation for Bermudians employed at the hotel. Mr. Speaker, Kempinski's commitment is to support the management teams of their hotels by ensuring that every training initiative optimizes the quality of the guest service experience, drives profitability, and that the hotel team are professionally developed. Mr. Speaker, I remind this honorable House that the Tourism Investment Act 2023 provides for full exemption from land tax for a new hotel for 10 years, starting from the 6th year of the hotel's opening date to 15 of the same date. Mr. Speaker, Clause 4 sets out the important means by which Ariel Sands qualifies for this exemption, which is that 70% of the hotel staff must be Bermudian in years 6 through 15. Mr. Speaker, Ariel Sands proposes a 60% Bermudian staff at the time of its opening in 2025, with the percentage increasing to the required 70% with local training and incentives. Mr. Speaker, the advantages and benefits for the Bermudian economy by way of this order include the increase in hotel beds, an increase in employment in tourism, and the tourism-related sector and promotion of Bermuda as a tourism destination to European and Asian markets. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to commend this order for the support of this honorable House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Junior Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Kennedy.
Yes,
you have the floor.
thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Junior Minister for bringing good news, actually, for Bermuda. I guess I did have I wasn't quite sure which company the honorable member, when he said it, I just wanted to make sure, was he talking about Kempinski, not I don't know, he said something. Could he just clarify that for me? I wasn't quite sure.
You want to just yield a minute so you get
Yeah,
clarification?
yeah.
Minister, just trying to get a clarification on the name so that he can continue his presentation.
Kempinski Hotel Group. Kempinski Hotel Group.
Thank you, Minister, for that. Junior Minister.
Yes, thank you very much. And that's excellent news. Many of us would know this five-star establishment will do a fantastic job. Ariel Sands has been, my goodness, on the subject or on the table for this kind of development for many moons now. So it's good to see that there is some light at the end of the tunnel for this particular property, being a prime piece of real estate that we believe can do good for Bermuda. I must say, I'm not sure about the time frames. I didn't hear much about when they plan on taking this on. So it'd be good to hear from the Junior Minister whether when this project will take place. I do take note on the bill that the request came in June. It's now 6 months later, so I'm not sure if it's typical for it to take that amount of time to approve something like this here, but it'd be interesting to try and figure out why has it taken at least half a year just to get this to the table now, understanding that, quite frankly, we need the rooms to get going here. And I would have thought, and there may be a legitimate reason for it, but I would have thought it would have been a matter of urgency to get these things up and going. But suffice to say, I do want to thank the honorable member for his overview. It is good to hear what they plan on doing. What we'd like to now understand a little better is when do they plan on getting this going? I'm sure that the public would like to know so that they can get themselves prepared, electricians, carpenters, you name it, laborers and the likes get prepared for a project like this here. I don't know the total cost of something like this here, how much it will take in manpower, but it'd be nice to see Bermudians there working to get it up and going. And of course, in addition to that, be manning the actual hotel once it is established. One of the challenges that the industry continues to have right now is getting Bermudians back into it. It almost appears as if we kind of walked away from it, and now we're having to train and get people back into it. And so I hope that the honorable member, and I'm sure that the minister will be working very closely with the relevant institutions, the unions and the likes, to ensure that we can get as many people back into this industry as possible. I may have one question in the joint committee. There's no committee for this here. That's right. That's right. It's order. Yeah. It's order. Yeah. But so I'll ask a question. I'm still not convinced that when we state here that one of the conditions is that this place has to be 70% manned by Bermudians within a few years. It seems a bit aggressive and just throwing out there. I don't know how we're making out with some of the other hotels and getting to that point. I don't believe we've been able to reach that point, quite frankly, with the hotels that have been built. But I could be wrong. It'd be interesting to hear from the minister whether or not that is the case. Again, we stated when the 15 years, when the act was passed many moons ago, from 10 years to 15 years, not too long ago, that this would bring up for any new development and any renovations coming up, that they would be seeking 15 years as well. And so one of the challenges I have is that we're offering, these concessions to these hotels, but yet another part of that, the sister to the hotels, is Airbnb, and we're seem to be taxing more the Airbnbs now as we go forward, but yet the hotels are getting concessions that they've never seen before. So I hope that the minister will be taking a look at how we're working with the hotels as well as how we're working with Airbnb to bring about some balance as to the taxation so that we can get as many rooms up and going and people as successful as possible. And in addition to that, Bermudians back into the industry. And so really, at the end of the day, we support this. We'd like to see this happen as soon as possible. And maybe we can get some answers from the junior minister on a few of the questions that I had. But I must say, at the end of the day, we knew that everyone would be coming in looking for the 15 years, and the taxpayers are going to have to foot that bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. MP candidate, is any other member? MP Keynes, would you like to make a contribution?
If it pleases you, Mr. Speaker.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I am excited to learn of this opportunity for our country. If you consider back in the 1980s, when we were a thriving tourism destination, there was a member of government at the time that then, the 1920s, a then Minister of Tourism said that we have too many tourists in Bermuda. Our streets are too busy. We put a moratorium on new hotels in the 80s, and then that moratorium was extended for another 10 years. That same minister said that we have we do not want burgers and French fries type of visitors coming to Bermuda. We know directly thereafter, we had it so good in Bermuda that we thought that this will continue forever. We saw Lantana, the Somerset Bridge Hotel, Sonesta, Belmont, Glencoe, Horizons, Inverary, Elbow Beach, Waterloo House, Harmony Hall, the Hamiltonian Hotel, Ariel Sands, Coral Island, Clearview, Marley Beach, Flamingo, White Sands Hotel, Palmetto Bay Hotel, Monroe Cottages, the Bermudiana Hotel, Mermaid Beaches, Longtake Cliffs, and 9 Beaches, and the Southampton Princess. All of those hotels are gone, and many of them are starting to come back. We see now that we start to see a redevelopment in tourism. Now, we have to understand when we talk about concessions, what we are trying to do. This is an excellent time to see people investing in Bermuda. We see Michael Douglas and his family, who are a Bermudian family, who are investing in a waterfront property that is on a prime location. We see the Comiskey Hotel Group, a renowned group, now showing confidence in Bermuda and investing in Bermuda. We have the opportunity with this hotel coming online, and by 2026, with the advent of the Southampton Princess, to have 2,500 beds in Bermuda. That will be just over 108% over our 2019 hotel inventory. So what we're seeing, Mr. Speaker, with a number of hotel properties that are in the pipeline, we see Bermuda can now see that we are starting to look at a renaissance in tourism. This hotel at the Ariel Sands allows us to go when the team at the BTA, when the team with the Ministry of Transport, when the team at the Airport Authority, when they start having conversations with the route planners for the hotel, we can talk about what the future looks like. We can point clearly to effigies of success around tourism, and we could point to that, what is happening at Ariel Sands. We can talk about what is happening at the Southampton Princess and down in your neighborhood, Mr. Speaker, at the Cambridge Beaches. All developments. Cambridge Beaches is a property, Mr. Speaker, that's over 100 years old. They have a fantastic legacy. This year, they have gone through major renovations. Their brand is growing from strength to strength. And we can see that the Ariel Sands, that has a historic family connection with our country, now a name badge that will build this hotel. We have the opportunity to partner with specific legislation to give specific concessions. I like the fact that the concessions were just not given without consultation with the Minister of Labor, that understands that if we are to build hotels for a very long time, our Bermudian citizen were able to go into the hotel industry and we're able to see it from one dimension only. What we're seeing with the ability for us to go through middle management and go up through management, that Bermudians could see from a very young age that they can come in as a bellman and rise through and become a general manager. That is something that the legislation enshrines. I think if we look in the Caribbean and concessions that have been given, this is something that is done throughout the Caribbean and is one of the reasons why we've seen a hotel investment that is growing very strongly. I think this bodes well for the future. We're looking at getting properties like the Elbow Beach and taking them off the back burner and bringing the hotel bed inventory to making our tourism product stronger. Why is this important? Mr. Speaker, you know, in another realm, I wear a different hat as a chair of the Bermuda Tourism Authority. We now are going out and selling this country globally. Our mantra is to go and tell people about the benefit, the good things to extol. This week we were on one of the Real Housewives shows. I know that you don't watch such a show, Mr. Speaker, but for those that do, the reach was to over a few million homes. And that is where we're starting globally to go to different places. We recently went to a trade show in London. Bermuda had been absent from the trade show in London for over 10 years. And people are starting to see us in the Northeast, in our breadbasket. And this is a string, a bow in our quiver. We believe that this is a legislation that bodes well for Bermuda. It covers all the bases, but making sure that it gives a commitment to the hotel industry, that the government is paying attention. It will give the necessary concessions, and it is balanced, that there are levels of accountability in the legislation. I think this is an excellent opportunity for our country going forward, but more importantly, this will allow us to marry in the work of our business community, the investors in Bermuda, the Bermuda government, the Bermuda Hotel Owners Association, the Bermuda Hotel Association, the people that need employment in Bermuda. And if we continue to work hand in hand with this and our tourism, we can only continue to grow from strength to strength as a destination with reference to tourism. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Keynes. Does any other member wish to? MP Anthony Richardson.
Good morning again, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
I'm actually pleased to add a few comments to this conversation in the instance of what I consider to be raising the bar in the context of Bermuda having a good reputation for a good service. And I do specify that service is not servitude. And it's interesting, as I see in other arenas, I guess, that there is in many instances a focus on excellence of service. I've made the point before, and I'll make it again, in that in the context of Bermuda, on a pure dollar basis, we may be expensive, but expensive is actually relative, and it must be put in the context of value for money. And so the push is always that there is a base level of cost for Bermuda based upon the fact of our virtual isolation and how things have to get here. But people will still continue to come if they perceive that what they're paying is worth what they're receiving. And in many instances now, I do see this on a more daily basis, and I certainly encourage others to understand that if you provide good service, then those that are receiving the service are more than happy to pay for that service. What happens sometimes, unfortunately, is if people are paying for a service that they do not believe is worth the value, in that they may have I guess what I call a poor attitude, it may be a poor presentation, it may be poor timeliness, and those sorts of things. That's what adds to a sense of this is not worth that, as opposed to if it's done well, people are happy to make those payments. For those that may, I guess, take staycations or be involved with others who come to the island and try to make reservations, what is interesting is that sometimes some of the more expensive hotels in Bermuda are actually full when those that are less expensive are not full. And that is another representation of value for money, in that if it is perceived that I'm going to a hotel, I'm getting all that I want, I wouldn't say I don't mind, but the amount that I pay is actually not as important. And recognizing, I won't call your name, but recognizing the honorable member, the same thing applies for service in terms of whether you're providing, whether you're a waiter, whether you're an accountant, whether you're a lawyer, whatever you're doing. If the service you provide is deemed to be of value, then people don't mind paying. And I'll smile and say this also on that note, in that there was a reason for a Bermudan professional to identify in the newspaper what their rate was. And I won't call the name, but certainly the rate was $950 an hour. And guess what? The service is regularly demanded. So the same thing applies in terms of it is really about what you are receiving as opposed to what you're paying. And so on that note, I'll say also, similar to the former speaker, the person spoke before me, MP Keynes, is that I was also surprised that we're at a stage whereby we are considering granting aerial sands concessions. Not surprised in the context of in and of itself, but I just did not realize that aerial sands was as actively advanced as it apparently is. It definitely bodes well. We know that aerial sands is certainly one of those private, niche, iconic hotels in the past, and it is more than gratifying to see that it is coming to the fore. And what the fact that it's coming to the fore now speaks to the fact that both the developer and the operator understand the economics of the hotel and are prepared to go forward, number one, by putting their names to it, and number two, by making the investment and putting the effort into what's required to get it to this stage, because clearly it's not a overnight decision to decide to come to Bermuda and then to do all the work and spend the money necessary to get it to this stage. And so I'll say again that I am pleasantly surprised that we are at this stage. In the context of the actual operator or the name with it, the minister or the junior minister has mentioned already is Michael Douglas's family name. And we know that sometimes what happens is the name recognition also adds to the value proposition. And so it'll be interesting to see how the hotel finally progresses and what the end product will be. I note in the presentation of the junior minister that the intention, if I'm not mistaken, MP Swan, is that it will be a 5-star hotel. And that even speaks volumes because just the fact that it aims to be labeled as a 5-star hotel indicates that they intend to provide a value to support what I'm sure is going to be not an inexpensive hotel stay. So again, it bodes well that we have another potential operator that'll have a facility that's going to be graded graded at the 5-star level. A couple of other comments I'll make is that for the transport industry, I think it's another opportunity for them to start to prepare themselves for another level of improved service. I think I've said it here before, and I'll say it again, is that something as, I guess, basic as the vehicles have to possibly be looked at because they are labeling themselves as limousines, but what they present is not what's expected. And so sometimes there's a challenge in that I ordered a limousine service, but the physical vehicle is actually not what I expect when I arrive. And so we may have to look around that to make sure that the presentation can actually match what is expected. And what made me smile with the junior minister's announcement is that the hotel is proposing to have several pickleball courts as opposed to tennis courts. And in terms of an amenity, it is interesting to note that several of the Bermuda properties have actually transitioned their tennis courts to pickleball courts. And some of the commentary is that the pickleball game is a lot faster, and actually it does cater to I want to say a different clientele, and sometimes an older clientele, because the pickleball game, while as rigorous and exciting, is actually a little bit less physically demanding than the standard tennis game. And so you're seeing that there are more and more courts being transitioned from traditional tennis courts to pickleball. And I think the last comment I'll make is to everyone who may be listening or who may be interested in the industry, because we have the Fairmont Southampton coming on board and other hotels, and it means that we're going to need to have more people available to work in those establishments. And as the opposition deputy leader alluded to, you commented on the fact that we're going to need more, we're going to need more and more Bermudians available. And so to the extent that there are persons that are either unemployed or underemployed, they need to start preparing themselves for what's going to be a significant opportunity in the next 12 to 24 months, so they can actually be prepared. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those comments, I'll just reiterate the fact that I'm excited to know that we are at a stage now whereby we are considering the next phase of development of the aerial sands, and certainly I look forward to the stage whereby they get to actually opening up, and we are able as a community to benefit more broadly from a new iconic hotel property. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Richardson. No other member? Or MP Campbell? Minister Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Aerial Sands was built and established by the Deal family in the early 1950s and operated as a hotel until its closure in 2008. It was one of the first tourist cottage colonies in Bermuda. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the hotel was demolished in 2014. I believe it was 2014, and the 13 acres that it stood on has remained vacant since. This same 13 acres is located immediately above a picturesque beach and has unobstructed views of Bermuda's famed South Shore waters. So it's in a prime location, Mr. Speaker. And the developers, JTRE Holding, after much due diligence, which has taken, I believe, approximately over a year, the past year, they have decided to move forward. Also, during this process, there has been some back and forth between the ministry and the developers, getting clarification, getting information. So that has somewhat delayed the process that we are now debating today. The developers, as I said, are JTRE Holding, and they, as the junior minister mentioned earlier, are looking to develop a 5-star product with 131 keys, consisting of 21 private 5-star villas, 33 hotel suites, and 30 condos. And I think it's very important to mention at this time, Mr. Speaker, that the condos and the villas, although privately owned, will form part, as is a requirement under the Tourism Investment Act, will form part of the hotel inventory. Now, again, I'm going to repeat what the minister said, the junior minister, sorry, said on this, because it's important to repeat this, that this project will provide jobs for our Bermudians during the construction phase and for many years after, during the operational phase. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the operator, the Kempinski Hotel Group, their mandate is to provide top-notch training for its employees. So what does that mean for our Bermudians who are looking to work in aerial sands once it's open? That means they get top-notch training. They increase their skills, and also in increasing their skills and experience, they become an employee of choice, and then they can pick their destination, their future. They're marketable, more marketable now, having had that top-notch training. So it's important for Bermudians from that perspective that not only are you being trained, you're being trained in providing luxury service. And I think that's important for our Bermudians to keep in mind as it relates to their career prospects in the hospitality industry. As was mentioned by the junior minister, again, I will repeat it, is these concessions are consistent and in line with the Tourism Investment Act 2017 as amended earlier this year. Now, Mr. Speaker, when we made those amendments, this is the type of investment, this is the type of project that we had in mind when we brought those investments to this house earlier this year. And it's good to see that in bringing our concessions in line with what is being offered by our competition further to the south, that it is bearing fruit. Now, Mr. Speaker, the pre-development phase is ongoing now, I'm told, and the plan is to go into phase 1 at the end of this year. The pre-development phase will finish the end of this year. Phase 1 will begin at the end of this year, in which they will put this project out to tender, and that should conclude by mid-2024. And at that time, construction will begin mid-2024, and it's expected to finish the end of 2026. The Kempinski Group will join the project and get on the ground in 2025, so that that training of our project, that their input can be put in as early as possible, the training of the future employees. And finally, the plan is to open this hotel fully in early 2027. I'm excited about this. I thank the junior minister and the minister who sits in another place for bringing this tourism investment order, and I support it fully. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister Campbell. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Hayward? Minister Hayward, sorry.
Mr. Speaker, as stated by Honorable Member Keynes, the revival of Bermuda's tourism hinges upon strategic investment. And strategic investment is what this government actually seeks. And that is facilitated by these investment orders that we put in place. Mr. Speaker, the industry standard in terms of the number of Bermudians employed hinges around 70%. There is a misconception that the majority of employees within our hospitality industry is non-Bermudian, but that is not the reality. The reality is it's around that 70% mark. And so the 70%, which is built within the order, is consistent with what current industry standards. You have some establishments that are higher than 70% and some are lower. Where we have occupational categories that are lower than 70%, that's typically in management, and that is what we seek to ensure that we have great Bermudians taking advantage of greater opportunities in those particular areas by putting the training and management development requirements in place. In the last meeting of the House, Mr. Speaker, we actually highlighted where the Department of Workforce Development had successfully worked with a number of hotels to vet their development plans, and those plans are actually bearing fruit. I did want to speak to a comment that Honorable Member Cannoner made in terms of Bermudians will be footing the bill for these concessions. We have reduced taxes for Bermudians. Bermudians are not paying increased taxes because we are having these concessions put in place. Additional to that, right now we are receiving absolutely no jobs, absolutely no increased bed capacity, and absolutely no additional taxes from having properties sit vacant and dormant. This certainly will increase the number of jobs, increasing the employee income within the industry. If we have limited bed capacity and bed inventory, that certainly is going to limit our ability to house tourists.
Minister, do you mind if I interrupt you for a moment? Do you intend to speak much longer? Because we are at 12:30. You can break and come back at 2, or you can close this and we can go to lunch at this point. Yeah.
No, I require another 90 seconds.
90 seconds? Okay, and then we'll go to
Yes.
lunch. All right.
And so the establishments would also raise taxes in other areas. So instead of us saying that the residents of Bermuda will be footing the bill, I would say that investment and the development of the facility, the taxes generated and the income generated will actually offset the taxes that we are deferring to support the development of this site. But development is what we need, development is what we want, and development is what we're getting. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, before you sit, would you like to move us to lunch?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourns to lunch.
Is there any objections? There are no objections. The House now stands adjourned until 2 p.m.